pleasure to ask Jello to our stage right now to perform not for the first, but the second time at the Hippodrome. Jello Biafra, ladies and gentlemen.
Buy my soda, said the moose diarrhea salesman. And we did. We all did. But when we brought it home and opened it, it was not what we thought we were getting. And instead of searching for what we really had in mind, we settled for searching for another moose diarrhea salesman. I remember how disappointed I was when my family brought home our first TV. It wasn't because it was black and white. When you turned the TV on, it wasn't President Kennedy on the screen. See, when we first went to the store to buy the TV, President Kennedy was there, in color, row after row of him, all the way to the ceiling. Look, Aaron, there's President Kennedy. See, that's President Kennedy. Oh, hi, President Kennedy. I toilet trained lady. On June 17, 1963, the United States Supreme Court gave me the best birthday present a well-rounded 5-year-old kid could ask for. They outlawed prayer in public schools right before I started kindergarten. On November 22nd, 1963, President Kennedy's brains were blown apart on national TV. I came in from the yard and saw my mom crying on the couch. What did I do this time? I'd already driven her to tears once that day. Later, in that same living room, Lee Harvey Oswald was gunned down on TV before my very eyes, and again on the instant replays. Kennedy's funeral dirge played on as the flag-draped coffin lingered on the black and white screen for days as people filed past to say goodbye. Even I sensed this was a sad, heavy moment, and I was upset too. I wondered if cartoons shows would ever come back. I liked cartoons, followed at 6 by NBC News. I watched both with equal fascination. I'm told my favorite cartoon characters at the time were Bullwinkle and Senator Everett Dirksen, whose nephew was Dirk Dirksen, who ran the Mabuhay, by the way. Oh, no. Even then, I was a news hound, alive at a crucial time and alert to what I saw and what my family chose not to hide. If I asked them what a race riot was, they'd tell me. If I asked them, Daddy, what's Vietnam? They'd tell me. Yet, I was terrified of going to Taos, New Mexico over spring vacation because I was afraid I might run into some greasy Mexican frito banditos there with the bullet bells and big ass who sneer at me as they lean against dirty buildings and might grab me and run off with me like I'd seen them do in so many cowboy and cartoon shows. I was all for Negro civil rights. But when I saw in My Weekly Reader, remember My Weekly Reader, that Native American Indians wanted rights too, I couldn't believe their nerve. How dare they ask for rights after all the trouble they caused on Daniel Boone? I grew up in Boulder, Colorado, about 4 miles from the Rocky Flats nuclear weapons plant. Only time will tell what that did to my brain. In first grade, on the playground, we'd play war. Sometimes even I'd find myself joining the pack of boys, all chasing one other kid dubbed the Jap, all over the playground. Didn't hit me till years later that a lot of times the Jap was the only Vietnamese kid in our grade. I never heard of God till about 3rd grade. The same year, I had to stay after school one day and write over and over again, I will not laugh during flag pledge. I will not laugh during flag pledge. Even my mom still laughs over that one. At home, my father would read me and my sister, who's dead now, Greek, Roman, and Egyptian mythology as bedtime stories. and I had a choice to discover and decide on my own whether or not to believe in gods. At school, they began asking us, right, so what do you want to be when you grow up? A lot of the boys who wrote that when they grow up, they wanted to be a policeman, a fireman, or a baseball player. And girl after girl wrote that they wanted to be a nurse. I, however, wanted to grow up to be the Penguin, or the Riddler. They were much more wholesome role models for a growing young boy to relate to. That summer, on a family vacation, my dad drove me through the ghetto of Detroit to show me up close why people get mad and start riots. It was exciting. We went to a big city, I saw the Henry Ford Car Museum, and I finally got to see some real slums. By the time we got back to my grandparents' place on the other side of Michigan in South Haven, Detroit was on fire, and my grandparents had a color TV. Vietnam blew up in everyone's face. By 5th or 6th grade, everyone at my school knew who was for and who was against the war. The smiling storybook policeman was now a symbol of violent brutality and hate, especially after my dad came home from a trip to California saying an LAPD cop had stuck a sawed-off shotgun in his belly when he came out to ask why they blocked off the entrance and strewn concertina wire down the middle of a horseshoe-shaped motel where he was trying to run a social work conference in Santa Barbara, California. He said the cop was shaking as much as he was. Anti-war protests were a regular event across the street from my elementary school at the University of Colorado. Somewhere I still have my souvenir student strike band. I was one of the first kids in school to have long hair, paid for it too. And somewhere around then was when my parents started boycotting Coors beer. One night, one of my mother's student employees at the University Library showed up at the front door of our house out of breath from running, frightened out of his wits, that he was about to get picked up and dragged away by the cops for being a draft dodger. I was the only one home. Then, one spring morning, my 6th grade teacher had the gall to start off the class by praising the National Guard for shooting 4 anti-war protesters to death at Kent State. Something inside me snapped. Something inside me said, "This will not stand. This will not stand. Not for me anyway. Not now, not ever." To rub it in, they forced us to sing almost all patriotic songs in the spring music program. But I had a way of getting back at them. I was the worst singer in the class. Sorry. In 7th grade geography class, there was a long detailed unit on Soviet communist propaganda techniques. How their government decided people's careers for them, and how they manipulated the masses through billboard slogans and slanted news reporting that didn't bother to tell people what the government didn't want people to know. How their school books rewrote history, said a Russian invented the light bulb. So in 8th grade, I thought, wonder if some of these same propaganda techniques are in the American history textbooks. What do you know? They were. Columbus discovered America. Eurocentric land grab speculators and religious fanatics came to visit and decided to stay and make the so-called New World civilized. It's bad enough finding out that there wasn't a Santa Claus. Then I found out that George Washington owned slaves, and that patriotic heroes of the American Revolution like Paul Revere, John Hancock, and Samuel Adams were, by modern definition, terrorists. My country was founded by agribusiness plantation pot growers who didn't feel like paying taxes, if that sounds familiar. And that those pilgrims with the Guns N' Roses asked we had to draw pictures of in elementary school before every Thanksgiving were as whacked out of their fucking minds as Jerry Falwell and Pat Robertson, and later gave us the Salem witch trials. That Father Sarah and the conquistadores and the Yankee cavalry weren't so civilized towards the natives after all. Did a Russian really invent the light bulb? How will we ever know? Much later, I found some old issues of Fortune magazine from early 1941, several months before the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, and already they were chock full of state-of-the-art, full-page ads from those same global corporations we know and love today, bragging about all the money they were going to make once America entered World War II. Then I found out that Ford and General Motors helped supply both the Allies and the Nazis, and that General Motors sued the American government after the war for blowing up their munitions factory in Dresden, and won. When I was 15, starting high school, I got called into the counselor's office. Eric, it's time for us to sit down and plan your career. What? I'm only 15. What about exploring? What about adventure? What about life? I don't want a career. I hate work. But Eric, look, we have a special hookup to the big computer out at the IBM factory in scenic Niwot, Colorado. You just tell the computer your skills, and do you have any hobbies, Eric? Tell them what you think you might actually be able to stomach doing the rest of your life in an age when meaningful work is a luxury, and the computer will choose your career for you. Cool. So I tried my sincere best and entered in on the multiple choice thing, all that life story, my interests, and I like theater, broadcasting, music, forensics, all the cool classes that are now getting cut out of the public schools because people are too greedy to pay their taxes and then are the first to complain when their kids graduate so stupid and violent when they come out the other end. I told the computer I was good at English, social studies, maybe math, and the computer clinkety-clunked for a while, as they used to do back then, and finally spat back on one of those weird-ass punch cards that only clueless high school counselors can read, and it concluded that I should spend my high school years preparing to become a dental hygiene. I guess I should stick to daydreaming, that great sin of the American education system for I first got yelled at for and dragged around the room by the hair for in second grade. Daydreaming, daydreaming of that far-off Walter Mitty Cinderella ambition like starting a band. But that's just a dream, because this is the 1970s. The sober, stupid, boring 70s that only a bonehead would want to bring back any part of in any form. When we were coming of age, we weren't dazed and confused. We were disgusted. We missed the 60s. All that fire, all that promise, all that fun, mellowed out, paved over, dumbed down, and sold back to us as what we now call yuppies. And rock and roll had been reduced to a spectator sport, when the so-called alternative scene that so many people take for granted today didn't exist. There was no punk, there was no hip-hop. There were no independent discs and zines and garage bands, let alone the internet and social media. All unheard of. In Colorado, you either sounded as horrible as the Eagles or you didn't play. Music was for mature adults, AOR, soft rock, people who paid their dues and could all play as good as Jimmy Buffett. The few friends I knew who played instruments at least talked about trying to start a band, but where would we play? What would we play? Maybe cover some songs by Deep Purple? I practiced singing on the way to school till I could even hit the high notes in Child in Time. Then, how do you think it felt that right when I was getting into Iggy and the Stooges and the MC5, my friends were chucking Black Sabbath for Emerson, Lake and Palmer, jazz fusion, and yes! I was a virgin till I was 19, in part because the intelligent hippie chicks I'd get crushes on were mostly into stuff like James Taylor and Cat Stevens. Being a shy, self-conscious dork with no social skills probably didn't help either. But James Taylor and Cat Stevens, Elton John? Give me loneliness and a vivid imagination any day. Now, at least I'm a shy, self-conscious dork with no social skills, except on stage. And I got a hell of a calling card to hide behind now, don't I? The name Jello Biafra was picked almost at random out of a notebook. Me and my friend John Greenway, who co-wrote California Uber Alice, sat around one night making up names for bands, names for people in bands, names for songs. I just liked the way the two images collide in the mind. And it did seem to have more long-term staying power than some of the others on the list, like smegma pig vomit, mucus melanoma. Oh, maybe it was wrong because when I was on Oprah Winfrey against Tipper Gore and all, can you imagine Oprah? And in this chair, the bad guy, smegma pig vomit. Oh well, couldn't go that far yet. But none of what's gone down from that little notebook till now would have been possible if I had clung to my original vow to always rebel by never changing. I was going to be the last die-hard hippie on earth. Other people were selling out and cutting off and styling their hair. I would never change. Because this was the one true way to rebel, and that's what it would be forever and ever and ever. I'm glad I didn't lock myself into being one thing in one uniform forever and ever and ever, like so many older punk rockers who should know better are doing now. Sometimes people ask me, how can you remember all this stuff? How can I forget? How can anyone forget? It makes me really sad and a little alarmed when someone my age I haven't seen in years tells me I remember more of their own childhood than they do. That they have no tangible personal memories of Vietnam or even Watergate. Or newer people have no idea that there weren't so many homeless people till Reagan seized power. You know, we were 16 when Watergate went down. It was on everyone's lips. Senator Sam and those hearings were the best reality show in the history of television, and Nixon was going down. But no, some tell me, oh, I don't remember much of anything from back then. I guess I had a bad childhood or something. But if I start humming a TV commercial no one's heard in decades, bing, they recognize it. That's scary. Why? On my 14th birthday, future sham cult figure G. Gordon Liddy and his CIA renegade friends were caught red-handed in the Watergate apartments, breaking into Democratic Party headquarters in what was supposedly a free country and what was supposedly a clean election. Burned out from stopping Vietnam or not, people fought back. We were pissed. But did we learn? Did we remember? Contragate is still with us, and Iraq is even worse. Now it ain't just government dope dealing and people getting left off the hook. but now we're killing hundreds of thousands of people and spawning more terrorists all over the world as the planet melts from climate collapse. At least Bill Clinton's penis never killed anybody. Now, when you look around at all levels or echelons of government you care to name, it ain't just one Nixon, it's a whole army of Nixons. The mask is off again. This time we embrace the face. I wonder why these things just don't register anymore. A few years ago, I couldn't even get kicked out of jury duty in San Francisco when I showed up to court wearing a Millions of Dead Cops t-shirt. Day after day after day. Nowadays, people are asleep. Nowadays, we've let ourselves be programmed to believe that American Idol, Dancing with the Stars, or Tiger Woods' penis, or whatever the fuck a Kardashian is, are bigger and more important things to worry about than the missing trillions of dollars stolen right under our nose by organized gangs of banksters and military contractors, and the great Reagan, Bush, Clinton, Bush, Obama swindle still going on. Money we could be using for real problems right now. Nowadays, we've been programmed to believe that everything from immigrants of a different skin color to gay people kissing each other on television and getting married to people of color daring to try to vote are more responsible for tearing apart our social fabric than conniving, greedy Republicrats. It ain't the fault of ISIS or the Tea Party or even Charlie Sheen that our hijacked, unconstitutional government of the people, by corporations, for corporations, must be overthrown. Yeah. Somewhere out there is what the late folk singer Phil Oakes called the real America. And I agree that there is something in this land, in us, that's worth trying to hang on to. It ain't all gone in the past with the old school or the summer of love. Go out and find it, feel it, touch it, create it. Can't deny it's getting scarier all the time, and what's ahead may not be pleasant, but it sure as hell won't be boring. Buy my soda, said the Moose Diarrhea salesman.